As the title of this video suggests, I quit alcohol exactly 1 year ago, and you might be wondering why I still keep this liquor in my possession. Well, I'll explain this a little bit later on, but first I want to share with you why I decided to go completely sober in the first place. And there are a few reasons for this. The first one is that I always knew alcohol was not good from a health standpoint, but I didn't realize how bad it was. The more I looked into what alcohol is and what it does to your body, it scared the life out of me. And most of us know that alcohol abuse brings about things like cognitive decline, alcoholic fatty liver disease, and a few more obvious drinking related disorders. But few people ever piece together that it's also linked to a myriad of other health conditions like high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and various cancers. And even though I wasn't suffering from any of those things, I've seen others close to me succumb to these things, and I didn't want that to be on my trajectory at all. And you don't need a fatal health condition to realize that alcohol is far worse than what most people give it credit for, even in smaller doses. And as I mentioned in my other video on alcohol, almost every country is bringing out lower and lower standard drink allowances over time because alcohol is far worse than what most health professionals and agencies originally thought. And the thing about the health guidelines is that they give people a false sense of security. And most people think that if they stay within the guidelines often, that they are considered good drinkers and they won't suffer any of the drawbacks of alcohol. People essentially start dividing people into two types of drinkers. There's those who have control over their alcohol intake, and there's those who don't. And those that think that they're in control of their alcohol intake believe that they're not on a trajectory to all the negative health outcomes associated with alcohol, and that they're not dependent on alcohol in any way. And so most people believe that having a problem with alcohol is related to the degree that someone consumes it. But I have a different outlook, and I don't believe that people ever lose control of alcohol, but instead that they never really had control in the first place. And if you want proof of this, think of all the times that you've planned to drink more or get intoxicated, and then also think of the times that you've drunk more or gotten intoxicated without planning to. And when you look at it that way, can you truly say that you're in control all the time with alcohol? And this is why I don't really like the way the term alcoholic is often used. Every so-called alcoholic started out consuming alcohol in smaller quantities like everybody else, and then they increase their consumption over time, which is understandable considering alcohol is one of the most addictive substances on the planet. And an addiction is really anything you do compulsively to make yourself feel better that has negative consequences. And I can tell you with certainty that there are absolutely no benefits in consuming alcohol, whether that be physical or mental. Instead, if you drink, it's just a slippery slope where some people get unstuck with it sooner than others. And this partly explains why some people can drink infrequently and then all of a sudden get wasted at a social gathering or drink copious amounts when they're stressed out. So in my mind, an alcoholic is not a drinker who has lost control, but rather a drinker that's realized that they were never in control. And Alan Carr talks about this concept a lot in his great book called Easy Way to Control Alcohol, which I encourage you to read, even if you feel like you don't drink that much. And as I said before, there's no physiological need for alcohol. It's essentially a metabolic poison that causes body-wide inflammation and a host of other problems with not just our health, but also many other parts of our lives. And when we run into problems with alcohol, we're often told in public health announcements to question whether we have a problem with alcohol when our lives start to show these detrimental signs of its work. But is our relationship with alcohol really the problem, or is it alcohol itself that's the problem? It's the source of so much damage in people's lives in so many ways that I honestly don't know how such a drug can actually be legal. It's not only associated with many cancers and chronic health conditions, but it's also at the center of millions of other deaths around the planet each year relating to alcohol-induced incidents, such as car accidents and domestic violence. Which brings me to the second major reason why I quit alcohol. I gave up booze in large part because I was so sick of the second and third order consequences popping up after I drank, even when I wasn't drinking a huge amount. And what I mean by second and third order consequences is not just the emptier wallet or the inability to drive somewhere when drinking. I also mean other things like alcohol's effects on my sleep, my nutrition, my ability to exercise and work proficiently, and also relate to people properly. And in the case of sleep, not only was alcohol waking me up at nighttime to go to the toilet and disrupting my sleep because it's a diuretic, but even when I was asleep after drinking, it really affected the quality of that sleep, even when I was only drinking smaller amounts. And oftentimes when I use alcohol to relax and wind down, like a sedative to go to sleep, it would give me a rebound effect where I woke up for no apparent reason. And even if I didn't wake up during the night after drinking, I'd still often feel tired the next day after drinking, despite getting enough hours of sleep. And this is because alcohol messes with your brain and your circadian rhythm and doesn't let you get into the deeper stages of REM sleep very easily. So when you drink, you often wake up after a long sleep, but you don't actually feel fully rested. And my work performance would usually suffer if I had alcohol in my system, because mentally I was a lot slower, but I was also more lethargic. And this lethargy and lack of focus didn't just occur after drinking the night before, it even lingered around after having drunk a number of nights before. And it wasn't just my work performance that suffered when I was on the booze. It also made me more irritable in my personal relationships as well. And at the time these things happened, I typically used to point these things back to the lack of sleep and blaming that, without ever blaming the exact thing that was preventing me from getting quality sleep, which of course was the alcohol. And the effects alcohol had on my sleep also affected my ability to train properly the next day as well. After drinking even small amounts, I'd often not feel as well rested or recovered from previous training bouts, and I'd also feel a bit dehydrated and generally just feel less motivated to train hard, which obviously affects your performance in the long run. When it came to nutrition, whenever I consumed alcohol, I was always more tempted to let my guard down and eat crappy food that would otherwise have never been on my radar. And even if you adjust your diet to compensate for when you consume alcohol, there'll always be deleterious effects to your body and your health regardless. And a lot of people attribute getting off the booze as a reason for losing a lot of excess body fat, but few people realize the associated effects alcohol has on their eating habits until they've actually stopped drinking and gotten off the booze. And I know a lot of people struggle with alcohol because it's seen as a societal norm in their personal relationships and social settings, but it's also often seen as a glue in many of their work settings and related social functions as well. And I won't deny that I really struggled with the social side of things when I decided to go sober, because getting off the booze is so much harder than it should be when there's such a huge level of societal conditioning that goes with it, especially in countries like mine, where drinking is almost seen as a national sport. And I'll freely admit that when I used to go out, I often used to think they need to drink to have fun, just like everybody else, or to fit in. And if you didn't drink, you're often treated like you're some kind of alien. And I find this perception very interesting. It's like this warped societal conditioning where alcohol is the only drug, where if you don't take it, people assume you have some sort of problem. But after giving it more thought, I decided that being a chameleon isn't something that I aspire to, and it doesn't align with who I am or my values. And if people can't like me or respect me because alcohol is not in the equation, then they weren't really true friends or people I should be hanging around anyway. It also wasn't so long ago that people used to get chastised for not smoking, but now most of us can see the light and know how bad smoking is. And nowadays, in most public places, smoking is either disallowed or it's heavily frowned upon. And who knows, maybe we even see the same thing eventually happen with alcohol. And I know the social pressure around alcohol gets a lot of people oftentimes, like it did with me, and many people think that they can't go out and have fun without alcohol being available in some way. But if you can't go out and do something fun or hang around with people without having alcohol, you're probably not enjoying what you're doing or the people you're hanging around with all that much. Instead, you're likely using alcohol to drown out any unwanted thoughts and feelings or make up for certain things that haven't been developed properly, like confidence. And a lot of people drink because they're anxious in social settings, and I know that very well because I used to be the same way some time ago, but alcohol is not a cure for anxiety. It's just a crutch, and it doesn't solve the underlying anxiety issues. Alcohol doesn't give you courage or confidence in these situations, it just momentarily reduces your fears, and it systematically destroys your confidence each time you drink in social settings. And if you can't live without alcohol to address an underlying psychological or emotional problem, then you can become very dependent on it. And that dependency can come in many forms. And we often wrongly picture alcoholics as homeless people on a park bench with a bottle in a brown paper bag. But we rarely think of somebody like a corporate executive or a family man who goes home after work and inhales a bottle of wine every night just to cope with life. So for me, the definition of an alcoholic is quite different, and it was only when I truly got off the booze I could really see how addictive it was. Whether it was just needing a couple of drinks to wind down for the day or feeling the compulsion to drink at every social occasion, I can now see how much of a grip that alcohol had on me. And this brings me back to why I keep a can of bourbon and Coke in my fridge and some hard liquor in my cupboard. When I quit alcohol, I quit on the spot. I realized what alcohol was and what it did to me, and I didn't want any more of it. I didn't feel I was wasting a drink in my fridge or my cupboard because I realized there was absolutely no advantages in consuming alcohol in any way. And you might be asking to yourself at this point, why I haven't thrown out my remaining alcohol? Well, I'm not recommending that you should keep alcohol in your possession if you decide to quit, but for me, I keep it for a bit of an FU factor. I can look at it every time I open the fridge or the pantry cupboard and know that it holds no power over me in any way. And to me, that's the ultimate victory. If I can look at booze almost every day and not feel at all compelled to drink, I feel I can deal with many other things that life throws at me. And to be honest, it's not even a battle for me anymore with alcohol. I'm void of any feelings of temptation that I once had for it. I still do a lot of the things that I used to do, like going out to gigs or meet up with mates at sporting events, but I do those things because I want to go out and do those things and be around those people, not just because there's alcohol available. And sure, some of my friends still drink, and I don't reprimand them for that, but I must admit that more and more of them are doing the same and cutting out alcohol for similar reasons to my own. In fact, some of them actually quit long before I did. Many of them came to the realization, like I did, that you can't really control alcohol intake all that much. We think we can control alcohol, when in reality, alcohol controls us. And we're conditioned by society to believe that alcohol is just a normal part of life. And again, I can assure you though, that there are absolutely no benefits from consuming alcohol. And if you ask any person who drinks why they drink, I can assure you that you'll never find any reasons, only excuses. And for me, when I weighed up giving up alcohol, I couldn't think of any positive benefits it provided my life. I only found excuses or deficits that I was trying to make up for. And this is still the same reasoning that drives me to remain sober to this day. I've struggled throughout various stages of my life with alcohol and used it to cope with things like anxiety and depression on numerous occasions. And although there have definitely been some great memories and highs while drinking, I've also hit rock bottom too, and I can count more worse times than good. And maybe you feel like you want to cut back or quit alcohol, but you just feel like it's such an insurmountable task. I honestly used to think the same way, and I never thought that I'd quit alcohol. But I realized that this thought process only existed when I was drinking, and until you can intentionally step out of that environment and remove yourself from it, only then will you consider other possibilities. So if you can, I encourage you to go sober for a few weeks or even a month and try and see those other possibilities. And if you do decide to cut back on the booze, be sure to take serious note each day, not just about how your body feels, but also about how everything else in life is when alcohol isn't in the picture. And even if you don't do anything at all, at the very least I hope that my experiences with alcohol and going sober has made you think a lot harder about what alcohol really is, what it does, and what place it should have in your life, if any. That's my take on this topic, but I'm interested to know what you think in the comment section below, so do share your thoughts and experiences with alcohol and even going sober. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.